Hey folks, back again with another unit. This time it's a single stage unit. So let's take a look at how we give the treatment to the single stage units here. Okay, let's go over this one. This one was brought in. Owner complaint is that the engine doesn't seem to run right when they start it up. The RPMs bounce all over the place, so it's like it surges, and so they've just asked for a general tune-up. So far all I've done is give it a walk around and remove the lower cover to make it easier to get started on things, as well as to just kind of give it a once over and look at things. And I also applied some rust penetrant to some rusty fasteners that are probably still going to break when we go to take them off to do things like check the belt or further engine diagnostics as needed. So there's some rusty ones up there. You can see the penetrant trail as I sprayed them down. That's about all we've done so far. So let's get into it. Owner brought it in with an empty fuel tank, so the first thing we're going to need to do is give it some fuel. This is a two-stroke machine, and it takes 50-to-1 mix. So I've got a can of 50-to-1 mix here that we're going to use. And so let's get at it. Let's see if it starts and verify the customer complaint and see if it surges for us. Choke on, prime. So we might have been able to hear the RPM surge a little bit. We're going to run it a little bit longer and see if we can warm it up and see if that goes away. But now that we've got it started, we know it's going to work, and we've been able to hear just the engine. We're going to go ahead and hook up the exhaust. It's going to make it a little bit harder to hear the engine itself, but we have to. So it seems to start a little bit hard maybe at first here, but once it's running and off choke, the RPMs, they bounce a little bit, but nothing too wild. Makes me wonder about the fuel quality and the type of fuel that the owner's using in the machine. We can take a look at the carburetor, but let's go ahead and give the owner the requested tune-up, and then we'll come back and we'll run it some more and see if anything shows up now that we've kind of run it and disturbed it a little bit. Clearly it's going to start and run and should work for the most part, so perhaps we need to run it a little bit more, but I'm kind of leaning towards fuel quality issue here. So let's get this thing up in a good working position so that we can get this off and get to the spark plug, and maybe we'll just pull the whole covers off so we can see everything, and we'll pull the belt cover off so we can see the belt. So let's stand this up, turn that off to the side, and I'm going to bring this back and forward. And then while we're here, go ahead and clamp this off just in case I need to. You can see the fuel level in the tank and how low that is compared to where the cap is, so we shouldn't have to worry about anything and run out of the cap. If we're lucky, we might be able to get to the spark plug, which is going to be right here, without pulling the cover off, but I'm going to go ahead and pull the cover off for clarity. Now you can see the spark plug down the hole there. Make sure to twist it, pull on the boot. Alright, I was worried about that one. We might have to get a new one of these. And we need a wrench for the fronts there. And then we've got a couple on the side here. A little bit more. Alright, here's our belt cover off so we can properly inspect the belt routing diagram too if we have to take it off and put a new one on. Notice the rusting right through the lip of the thing there. It's worn. Don't forget to check the scraper blade. Should we do that yet? Let's see if we can pull this cover off. And to do that, we're going to need to pull the chute too, which I forgot to spray. We'll do that now. Maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't. Find out. Pull these two off. Those are on there pretty tight. Let's use something else. Oh, look at that. Snapped it right off. No big deal. Get some new ones for those. Nobody likes his number 3 Phillips here anyways. Well, that one came apart. Pretty rusty. And we'll try to be a little bit gentler with these here. So the hole that these go through appear to be plastic, and you know it's a carriage head bolt, and the outer part is seized on a little bit, but it's surrounded by plastic, so we have to be careful about our use of heat to help loosen up some of these stubborn fasteners. So this might be a good time to use the inductive heater to warm them up just enough to see if they break free a little bit easier, but not so hot that they start melting the plastic that the bolts go through. So I have here our Mini Ductor 2 induction heater. This thing works fantastically. And I'm just going to try to warm it up a little bit. I don't want to get it smoking hot. I just want to get it warm. It's going to smoke a little bit because of the penetrating oil put on it. But I don't really want to melt the nylon out of the insert part of the lock nut here. I just want to get some heat into it to see if it helps a little bit. And you can see I melted a little bit of the nylon. A little bit more than I wanted. Heat's quick. Now of course we want to work quick. And I think it's going to spin in its hole. So I might need to heat it and quench it, heat it and quench it, or figure out how I'm going to get a vice grips on the backside of a carriage head bolt to get it off. It's part of the dangers of working on these machines here is they get rusted, and then sometimes these plastic collars, they can only take so much. The chute itself is metal, but the collar that it bolts to on the inside here is just plastic. Let me see if I can bring it down for a closer look here. So you can see here that we got carriage bolts on the inside, and this, it's hard to see because it's black plastic, but this inner layer here, this collar that comes up from the chute here, is plastic, and then this part here is metal. And unfortunately, the bolt, most of the meat to that square head is in this plastic part, and so the bolt just has a tendency to want to spin. Might be able to see the tick mark on the bolt moving, but it doesn't really want to go anywhere. And the plastic doesn't feel like it's really going to slow it down or stop it from turning. I feel like I'm going to strip out that square hole, which will make reassembling it more difficult. And I don't want it to grab and crack the plastic either, because this is one of those older units that's going to be hard and or expensive to probably find parts for. So we want to keep it in good shape here. So I think I'm going to try to get some vice grips on the back side of the carriage bolts, or maybe on the spacer. On the spacer right here behind the bar, and see if I can grab a hold of that and stop it from turning. Okay, so I was able to get a very small, like 5-inch vice grips on the carriage head bolt on the inside, and through warming and quenching and warming and quenching the nut, I was able to get it to break free. I did melt the nylon inserts of the nuts. That's okay. I will just get some new lock nuts. That's not a big deal. Whoops, sorry. You know, it certainly is not necessary to pull this cover off during a standard tune-up if you don't actually need to. I'm simply doing this so that we can get a chance to see what's in here in case you've never serviced a single stage snowblower before. So I've got them cracked loose, and now we should be able to start pulling pieces out. Be sure to get the spacer for these side ones here. Keep track of them. And probably we'll go ahead and either replace the carriage bolts or see if I can clean up the threads a little bit so reassembly goes easier. So this one, yeah, I took it easy, going slow by hand. We'll take it off. Again, be sure to put it back together proper. Don't forget to find that spacer. There we are. Okay. So there you can see the square holes that hold the carriage bolts in place, and you can see that this is a plastic collar. This one's gotten a little bit rounded, but I think with some clean threads I'll be able to properly put everything back together and tighten it up yet. So now after all that, let's go ahead and get this cover off. Or attempt to. So here you have it, a little two-stroke engine, plastic carburetor, and a multi-rib belt system. And looky right here, got a decent sized crack. Oops, you can't actually see that. You definitely want to make sure that we at least inspect the belt here. We can see that there's a bit of a gouge or a crack right there. And then when we look at these, I'm not so much concerned about the very bottom of the ridges or the back side of the belt as I am the edge of the belt, the edge of the ribs. And I want to check that out, see if that's shiny and glazed. If it's shiny and like polished looking, that means that it's slipping and it needs to be replaced. And then we'll check and we'll confirm that it's properly routed. I've seen on more than one occasion that belts are put on but improperly routed, and then owners complain about lack of performance here. So we will get our cover and we will confirm that the belt goes over one pulley, under the other pulley, and it's not supposed to go under here, but rather it's supposed to go over the top of this white, it's not really a pulley, it's more like your belt brake. So when you let go of when you pull the handle, that goes back, and then that allows the belt to tighten up and grip the drive pulley for the auger, which is this one here, and then this is your brake, so that when you let go of the lever, it pinches the belt between here and this metal bracket here. So it appears we got that correct. If we were to check things here, auger spins pretty freely. Our tensioner pulley right here, a little bit of play in it, but that's pretty normal. And it spins freely without sounding gritty, sandy, or like there's marbles rolling around in there. And then this is our engine pulley here, belt guide. It's in good shape. Spring works, things move freely. So that all looks pretty good and checks out. Let's go ahead and pull the spark plug out while we're here. And this should be a 3/4 inch socket, I believe. You guys up here. So we got the spark plug up top here. Remember to twist and pull on the spark plug boot. And then we can get in through here. Oh, maybe this is in, oops, wrong socket. Here we go. 3/4 inch socket here. Yeah, it seems to fit right. Spark plug doesn't look that old. I wonder if there was an attempt at a tune-up prior to bringing it in to us. Or it was just stored well. We can see here the electrodes are kind of a brownish, dark brownish, a little bit of orange color. Not too bad for a two-stroke. This is a BPM 7A. So we'll go ahead, and this is a NGK brand. So we'll go ahead and see if we can get a replacement for them. Put a new one in there for them. And that's about all there is for, there's no oil to change on these two-stroke units. It's a spark plug. Check and or change the belt. We'll price check the belt, see if the owner wants to go ahead and throw a new belt on since we got it this far down. And we'll put it back together, some fresh or clean hardware for the shroud. And let's go around and take a look at the auger and the scraper on the front of this machine. And then we'll start putting it back together. Alright, so now I've got the machine tipped all the way back, which was the whole point of the green fuel line clamp earlier, is so that now that I've got it tipped back, it's not dumping fuel out of the carburetor because it's leaking all over the backside there. Part of what we want to look at on these single stage units is this plastic scraper bar along the bottom here. If we look very closely, we might be able to tell that this side is thicker than this side. So this one is worn a little bit unevenly. And you can see there's a carriage head bolt right here and a carriage bolt, if I get out of the light, right there, that we can undo to replace them. The other thing we want to take a look at is this rubber auger here. Okay, we want to check to see the condition of the edge here. We want to check the overall condition of the edge. And then we want to check and see how much space there is between the auger and the housing. And you can see right here, I've got about the thickness of a finger, which is somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 inch worth of space. And that's starting to get to be on kind of the big side, to the point where when it gets to the really wet and heavy snow, this unit might have an issue clearing some of that, because a lot of the wet stuff is going to stick to the back side, and it's going to just kind of bypass the whole housing altogether. So we want to take a look at that and check both of them here. This one's actually better than the other ones. A lot less clearance here. We check it the whole way. We can check it in multiple spots. See how close it is. If you can easily put a finger behind it, it's probably a little bit worn. However, it still probably will do the job most of the time, except for the wet, heavy stuff, which these really weren't really designed for anyways. If I put this back down on the ground, the other thing I want to do while I'm here is I want to see how much space there is between the rubber auger and the ground here, and see that if at some point the auger will actually touch the ground. So right here it touches in the middle. Right about here it's pretty much touching on the outer edges. So we want to take a look, and you can see here it's touching here and over here. And so we want to make sure that the rubber auger is still making contact with the ground. And also take a look at the scraper blade. It's a little bit worn, but it is making relatively even contact with the ground. Oftentimes these machines, the replacement parts or these rubber augers here can sometimes be rather expensive, so not too many owners opt to replace those. Instead, they will use it till it will no longer clear snow, and then they move on to a new machine. But we still want to take a look at it so that we can properly advise the customer. You can see that they are bolted in, and you can buy replacements of them. Alright, while we have the cover off, may as well take a look at a few other things. Here you can see the ratchet stop for the chute, which has the different locking positions, and you can see it's rather rusty. from all the snow that would melt and then get underneath or in between here. So before we put the cover back on, we'll probably apply some sort of fluid film or other rust inhibitor to help reduce this from rotting so quickly. Additionally, because it's a two-stroke engine and the crankcase needs to be properly sealed, we are going to want to take a look at the bottom of the crankcase, and is just out of your guys' view. Let's see if I can get you lower. Okay, so we're going to want to take a look at the mating surfaces or the joint between the crankcase cover and the rest of the crankcase to see if the gasket is still holding up or if it's leaking. We can see there's a bit of a drip of oil here, but looking on the muffler, I'm thinking that this might be coming from buildup in the muffler versus actually leaking out of the crankcase. I'm also going to want to take a look at the crankcase seal and see how wet it looks and see if it looks like it's leaking or maybe drawing in dirt and debris on the intake stroke, because crankcase sealing on a two-stroke is important to starting an operation here. So might as well take a look at that, and we'll look through the little opening here at the flywheel side of the crankcase. I see a little bit of seepage, but nothing too alarming. If you get just right, if I can get the light out of the way, but if you can look through past the oily spot, which I believe is some sealant from the muffler flange. So if we come over here and look at the muffler flange, it looks like this is not the original muffler, and somebody may have put something on it. But if we can look past that and into there, underneath the flywheel, we can see that it's relatively clean, dry metal yet. And I think the crankcase seals on this engine are okay. You can see some more rust stuff. So we'll hit some of that with some fluid film too to prevent it from getting too bad too quickly, and see if we can prolong the life of this machine for the owner. So that's all of our inspections on this two-stroke unit. Now it's time to replace the spark plug, get it all put back together, and we'll test fire it again and see how it works. Alright, let's get this thing protected and back together. I found some new hardware, cleaned some old hardware. And so now I'm just going to hit this with a light coat of fluid film, trying to avoid the hot parts of the engine like the muffler. But I do want this to last as long as the rest of the machine will. So spray that down with a bit of fluid film, and we'll spray these brackets here that are looking a little bit rusty on each side. Hopefully that will help. If it ever needs to be serviced again, hopefully this helps make it a little bit easier for the next person who ends up having to service it. That ought to do it for the inside stuff there. Oop. Gas cap. Okay, so looks like we can use those washers again because they fit nicely for us. Got some bolts of equivalent length to the old ones. So these are going to be hex head bolts instead of Phillips screws. Hopefully I can get my socket down in there. Got some lock washers because these aren't lock nuts, so I got some lock washers for the bottom side here. We pretty much want to use locking hardware on these whenever we can, because there's a lot of vibration, and if we don't, it will probably come loose on us. We don't need to make them super tight, but we do want to make sure we have some locking hardware. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all the covers on. I got the top cover on, we'll put the side cover on, and then once all the covers are on, we'll go around and tighten things up here. So we got those. Let's move you around to the sides so that we can do the belt cover. Okay, got some more tools and some more hardware here. And again, to make things a little bit more easily serviceable, there was this bolt here that went in or came out kind of hard, so I'm going to just spritz that down with some fluid film to keep the threads from rusting up a little bit. I did take the bolt to the wire wheel and wire wheeled the portion that gets engaged with those threads. And we have these ones here that go in the cover too. And I'm just going to give them a tiny little spritz for some rust inhibitor, but you know, we want to keep it off of the belt. So and then we need to make sure this side hooks around the front first and the bottom. Get that put in a position. We want to make sure we start all these bolts, leave them loose till they're all in position. Might have to turn them in a little bit like here. Okay, so there's that one. We'll do the ones on the side here. Make sure things are all started before we take any sort of power tool to it. I want to make sure that they're all properly threaded to begin with. Yeah, so those feel good. So now we can get the electric ratchet. Still want to be careful here. Definitely helps running them down, especially with the locking hardware, but I'm going to leave them loose and come back and hand tighten them once they're all snug. Especially like these little ones here in really thin sheet metal. Not a lot at all to strip these out, so you want to be pretty gentle. Once they snug up, that's it. Okay, so I was able to clean the bolts, and I have one new lock nut, and so I'm going to have to reuse the other two lock nuts until I can get to the store. These are also happen to be thin profile lock nuts, so a standard lock nut might not have worked here, so I'm going to have to reuse these for the time being until I can get to a store and get some new ones and get those on. And then we got to make sure that we remember to put our spacers in the right spot. put this up. I'm going to do the back middle one first. Put the washer on it, and since this is a new lock nut, I've got the vice grips on it right away to keep it from spinning while I get that nylon insert started running down. Now that I'm getting close, but things can still wiggle, I'm going to go ahead and put the other ones in so I know I've got everything lined up. And then I can go ahead and snug that one up right away once those are in and lined up. And you know, it's through bolted, so I don't need to tighten the heck out of them and pull the head through the plastic or anything. I just got to snug them up. And so the insert went with the thick end towards the chute inside the bar here, so we'll get this side in first. We'll do this side over here. Come on, find your home. There we go. Goes over, push it out. And then just to prevent them from tearing out, I'm going to see if I can grip them with the vice grips like I did taking them off, just to help snug them up and keep them from stripping out that hole. And I'm just going to snug these up. I suppose if I really wanted to, I could use some sort of Loctite or after assembly locking compound on them. But I'm pretty certain with the rusty threads and what's left of them, they'll be all right. Make sure it all works as expected. Tight, 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 tight. All right, all that's left to do now is get that new spark plug in there, and we'll give it a test fire after we're done here. Make sure it all works again. Okay, I've been to the store. I've got the new spark plug here, and before I install it, I'm going to want to check the spark plug gap, and these ones should be 25 thousandths. So I've got my spark plug gap gauge here, and I'm right on at 25 thousandths. So let's get this installed. We'll go from there. Now my spark plug socket no longer has the rubber insert, so it doesn't hold my socket very well. So if I were to put this in here and then try to put it down that hole to get it into engage, my spark plug's going to fall out. And I don't want this dropping and hitting and changing for me. And I don't have another socket on hand. So, or if you don't have an actual spark plug socket at all, a little trick that you can do is you can take your paper towel, put it over your socket. This works with regular bolts and nuts too, but also spark plugs. And we're just going to push it in there with the paper towel, and then I will tear away the excess here. And that extra material is going to be just enough to make the spark plug fit tight, but it won't keep me from being able to remove the socket. So now So once it's held in there securely and I've torn away most of the extra paper towel, I can now tip it upside down without worries about it falling out. By the way, before I go ahead and put that in here, if you haven't already, it's a good idea to compare the old to the new. Make sure you don't have an extended reach plug or one that's got a projected gap when you shouldn't have a projected gap, and make sure that it's going to go in and be the same length as the old one. Okay, so we'll go ahead and try to get this started. Want to make sure that we start the threads by hand and make sure that it starts straight so that we don't cross thread anything. And once it bottoms out on its gasket, it's time to get a torque wrench and torque it. So I've got a torque wrench here, preset to the appropriate amount. And slowly turn it in, compress that gasket until I get my beat. Okay. There we go. Don't forget to retrieve your paper towel. Then we got to come back in. Be sure to hook up our spark plug wire. We want to make sure we hear that click so that we know that it's properly installed. Go ahead and put our screws and our cover back on. As always, I like to make sure that things get started by hand so that I know the threads are lined up and mating properly. And then these screws pretty much just hold this cover on, so they don't really need to be overly tight to do their job. Okay, now it's time to tip it up, put the rest of the covers on. So before I actually put the last cover on, I did mention that I was going to come back and start it up and double check to make sure that the surging was not present. So we'll take the clamp off, and I've got the exhaust hooked up. And now with the new spark plug in there and everything else checked, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start it, and we're going to run it a little bit more to see how well it goes. Well, I guess I feel pretty satisfied with that. It seems to start and run pretty stable now. I guess we'll have to wait for some snow to give it a real test. I'm going to go ahead and put the cover back on. Make sure that's free. I'm not pinching anything. Cable's free to move. then these just go into a couple of thin sheet metal speed clips, so not a lot of torque needed for those either. And there you have it. This one's ready for pickup. Thanks for watching.